You provide an example of a company like Enron and its CEO, Ken Lay, being held criminally accountable by comparing the public statements that he made with the actual data to prove fraud, that he knowingly and intentionally told a material lie. You also make the point that it's a crime to lie to shareholders. It's a crime to lie to Congress, to a jury, to a federal agent, but not to lie to the public. Why has there been no civil or criminal law to impose sanctions on political lies, such as Trump's egregious and still dangerous lie of election fraud in the 2020 election?
So I trace that problem, and I try and do it in a way that it's really for lay audiences. Like, you don't have to be a lawyer, let alone an election lawyer. So a very famous Supreme Court Justice, Oliver Wendell Holmes, had the view, which became known as the marketplace of ideas, and that the state isn't going to be deciding this is true and that's false, that it all comes out in this marketplace of ideas. And that's where you get this idea that the antidote to false speech is true speech. And you still hear Supreme Court justices say that from time to time. And I sort of trace the history briefly about that.
Right.
That idea really only applies and came up in the context of opinions, not factual matters. Right. But it ended up getting applied broader than in sort of how it started. That's sort of one of the things, if you're a lawyer, that happens a lot. Like, a case starts in one way and it sort of ends up spilling over and having unintentional consequences.
Misused, you might say.
Yeah, exactly. And the Supreme Court most recently has said there is no First Amendment protection for false speech. So committing a fraud, if you say, you're in a bank and you say, give me all your money, I'm holding it up, like, that's speech, but it's speech as part of a crime. If you lie to Congress, that is speech, but it is considered fraudulent and it's not itself protected. Now, to be fair, false political speech, to have that be subject to either civil or criminal regulation has downsides. I'm enough of a lawyer that I address the pluses and minuses, but it's really been carved out. I think there is both this history as to the limitations, but also it's worth remembering that who makes our laws? Our laws are made by politicians. So, you can understand them going, let's see, do I want the law to apply to me that would make it a crime, or to disqualify me if I were found to lie? You could see them saying, I don't want to do that. So, by the way, just in case people think that this is some far out idea, one of the things I do is I look overseas to see what do other countries do. I've looked at what do states do here. And there are really good examples of countries that deal with this problem.
And that's exactly where I'm going with my next question. You provide examples.
What are we up to? Are we up to 4?
Number 4. You
okay.
Provide examples from France, from Brazil, from Germany to address lies, to, as you put it, shore up their systems against demagogues who would seek to use lies to destroy democracy. That includes the German law denying certain speech about the Holocaust. You made the point that the German law is protecting, quote unquote, public safety rather than private property. This says something important about their values. So what will it take for Americans to acknowledge that this industrial scale lying is a matter of public safety?
So I think one of the things that we can do is, let me just give you an example of what England has done, and then some good news out of California. So England has a law, and the reason I'm picking England is that people listening to this are going to be thinking, okay, we're not looking at some, fly-by-night country or what the president would denigrate as countries that are not worthy of our looking at them, and I'm not going to repeat his language. So England, obviously, we come from an English legal tradition. They have a law that if you are found, after due process is accorded, to have lied about your political opponent, you are barred from holding that office. And the last time it was applied, it was to somebody who lied about their political opponent. And by the person who found to have lied won. And the court said, you cannot sit because you did that. In New York, which is where I'm from, and in Better New Yorker, if you are found to, after, again, due process, to committed any felony when you are a public official, you are automatically out of office because it's considered so antithetical under New York law to what it means to be a public official. California, according to Gavin Newsom, who tweeted about this, he just signed into law a statute that said that if you lie about ballots with the intent to undermine ballot access and ballot counting, that is a crime. And so the answer to your question is, where do I see potential movement here? At the state level. The state can regulate their own elections. They can have their own rules. It's, famously, the states are viewed as the laboratory of democracy. And that's where I see there can be real potential movement. Obviously, the current Congress, they can't seem to do much of anything. And so that's not going to happen now. But it also isn't going to happen unless people want it and react to it. And, this is one where, we still have the power of the vote as much as it's being challenged. So that I'm not saying that at the federal level it's going to happen anytime soon, but I really want
you're reluctant to talk about constitutional amendments just because that's such an enormous, bar to get across.
I wanted to try and figure out things that could work and work now. That one of the things I say at the end is I am all for more civics education, but I do not really want to hear from people saying that we have to do that, because it's true. Of course it's true, but it's not solving for an immediate problem. I think my analogy was, the Titanic hits an iceberg and the captain says, you know what, I think we really have to invest in greater research on radar. That is true, but not the time and place.
I confess that I'm frequently talking about the need for better education, ultimately a more informed electorate, but that's
you're right.
Long-term
of course
challenge.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, you are right. It's just that is I think that it's important. This reminds me a lot of times when I was the general counsel of the FBI, I definitely thought about what do agents and the analysts need now? What is the immediate concern, and what are sort of midterm and sort of long-term projects, and sort of divided things that I was doing into those buckets.
But I want to stick for 1 second on this question of the values that underlie all of this. Again, sort of in the German context, they talk about it in terms of public safety, versus the more traditional approach for Americans, which is private property. I mean, is that the kind of shift, focus on the reason why these changes are needed? Because it's endangering people, it's endangering the society. Is that something that we're capable of getting to?
I do think it's endangering society. In the German context, there also was a concern about the undermining of human dignity and the personhood in the specific law they were dealing with there, which you referenced, which is the denial of the Holocaust. I do think we can get there, where it seems like we're obviously a long way away from that. And the idea of, as John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can, what your country can do for you, but this, which is, to me, just seems like the total Trump ethos, which is, very, very selfish and sort of like, what am I getting out of it? Which, by the way, of course, people are entitled to that, or to think about what is the country doing to make our lives better. But the other flip side of that is the tens of thousands of people who in the military and public service every day, whether here, overseas, who are doing things for the country, and the idea of acting out of principle and of patriotism is one where there are so many people who are doing that, but it is not the mainstream that has sort of captured the attention of our political world and our mainstream media.
Yeah, well, to suffice to say, there needs to be a lot of shift in public consciousness before we get to that point where where values about our well-being end up being the focal point for our national leaders.